Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session on 5 design principles for a new normal from Donella Meadows. I know our colleague Marta is going to say something about that term new normal in a bit, but this is a session to draw from the wisdom of Donella Meadows at a time when we need all the wisdom we can get. I want to welcome Marta Cerroni from the Donella Meadows project at the Academy for Systems Change as our partner in this. And a bit of origin here, Marta and Melissa and I are from Co-Creative, had partnered to create an event along with some others for capacity builders for systems change work, for building the capacity of system leadership. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because we so loved working with Marta. The other reason we're doing it is because Marta is the steward of Donella Meadows' work. So it was a perfect confluence of the joy of working with Marta and her unique role in the world related to shepherding and stewarding and caring for and sharing the work of Donella Meadows. My name is Russ Gaskin. I'm with Co-Creative. We are partnering with the Academy for Systems Change on this work in part because Donella's work so deeply informs our own work. I would say it's probably true that it informs our work more deeply than almost any thinker. And I suspect that's true for so many people on this call, given the messages and emails that we've received from so many of you with expressions of your deep respect and love for Donella and for her contributions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marta.
Thank you, Russ, for the beautiful words, and Melissa for also holding the space. I only can reciprocate what Russ shared, that it's been a pleasure to work together, and the fact that co-creative really means it in terms of creating something together. And so that's what we're going to try to do here today, creating an experience together that revolves around Donella Meadows and her legacy and her beautiful way of embodying a lot of the ideas that energize us. So I am logging in from New Hampshire, and I'm very close to where actually Donella Meadows lived and taught for many years, for 30 years at Dartmouth College. You might hear the rain come in, so it's one of these lovely pets. If it's too disturbing, let me know. At any rate, I work for the Academy for Systems Change, and one of the beauties of doing that is that I get to really be around people who are continuing the work of Donella Meadows and grounding a lot of the work that we do with communities of learning around systems change around the world, but also with a specific focus in North America. And I'm just blessed to be swimming in these beliefs and ideas that come from that type of work. So maybe I should just mention that I'm very touched by being here together. It feels almost like a, I don't know, a collective party, if you will, of celebration of Dana's work and legacy. So I just want to share here that we will share more resources. There's plenty of things that at the Academy we do based on Donella Meadows' work and beyond. There will be some information that will be shared. And for now here, I just want to mention that Donella was very, very with me in the early days of the pandemic. I could literally hear her voice speaking to me, almost screaming, because there's so many systemic aspects in the pandemic, including the rapid exponential growth of cases, the instances of denial, delays that emerged from that denial in many countries, in fact. I come from Italy, so that was definitely a painful thing to watch. And so anyway, I almost heard really Donella talking about, you know, the difficulty of understanding, grappling with exponential growth, delays, denial, all things that were seminal and important in her work on limits to growth. So just to kind of situate us, she was with me during the pandemic, and she is also now with me and with many of us in this time when we're really looking deeply into the wounds of systemic racism, especially in the US at the moment, but also in other countries. And that empathy that she has embodied over the years, looking at things from the compassionate lens of systems thinking. So maybe I'll just give back to you, Russ, the word, and then just get us started with some of the input from our audience. And in the meantime, I'll go close the door because the rain is really loud here.
I think we're over to Melissa first. We want to connect who's on this call and where we're coming from, both physically where we're coming from and where we're coming from in terms of our values.
Thank you, Russ, and hello again to everyone. I am the voice and the face behind the emails that you have been receiving as you set up to join us during our time together, and I'm just delighted to have you all with us. As Russ mentioned, I work at Co-Creative. I have a role in our training program and also with some of our special projects. But beyond telling you about me, we're really interested in getting a sense of who you all are. So thank you to those who in advance experimented with Slido. If you did not do that in advance, now is your chance. It's okay, it's very easy. We would like you to open up a browser tab or use your phone or another device to browse to slido.com. And this is information we're going to be using throughout the session. The code is Donella. And this is the geographic representation. Wow, Wales, Idaho, New Hampshire, London, other parts of California, the UK, New Zealand, Chicago, India. Thank you for being here. I'm not sure what time it is there right now. Finland, Boston, 4 a.m. Wait a second, go back up, Russ. It's 4 a.m. in, oh, and down a little bit for me. Or maybe you can just tell me where it's for. Oh, Moss, thank you for being here. Where it's 4 o'clock in the morning in Australia. Canada, Wisconsin.
We'll also share these out on a map afterwards.
Yep. Oh, almost midnight in India. Thank you for being here. From Wales too. Wow, this is really fantastic. And here's what you all have told us about the values that inform your life and work. I feel very grateful to be a part of a group that's going to embark on this conversation with this set of values. Thank you so much. And as Russ said, we'll share this information out when I send an email to you all later this week. I'm going to turn it back over to Marta now to get us started and set the context.
Thank you, Melissa. So I would like to take a moment to really arrive here. And to do that, I would like to invite us to take a moment of silence. And a silence in its healing qualities, cleansing qualities, but also in its uncomfortable qualities. Maybe we can have the share screening with an image that inspires that stillness. So we're just going to take 30 seconds or so of silence to get us here, to arrive here. Thank you for doing that with us. I'm thinking that it's whenever it's a time for systemic change, it's also a time for deep, deep pain. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that through this silence. When we talked, Ras and I and Melissa, we talked about this title that came to us, The New Normal. You know, we thought it would be a provocation a little bit because nothing felt normal anymore. We started designing for this idea at the time of the pandemic, and everything was disrupted. And so what would even a word like that or an expression like that mean? And what would we normalize going forward? And so we just want to hold that term with a little bit of lightness and a provocation, knowing that not only there are certain things that are not normal anymore, don't feel normal anymore, and there's certain things that feel even too normal still. And so in that dichotomy of what we actually might want to bring into the new normal, if we are creating one together, without defining it, that's not our purpose here, but we wanted to share this potential. And Dana, sorry, this is, if you hear, this is a thunderstorm here, so be with me. Dana is with us. I mean, she was definitely a powerful presence in the world, and I think she's here with us now. And I'm just moved to say that she was in this imagining space a lot of thinking of what new normals are possible. I mentioned that she was very present to me, and she still is, and she's with us also through the thunderstorm. And with that, I just would like to get us started. You know, like it's been at a time of big changes deeply inside of us and in the world. And I'm just curious, Russ, how you want to relate to that moment. What is the moment for us? Thank you.
Well, there's definitely a sense of disruption. A couple months ago at the Skoll World Forum, we did a session with some other folks on COVID-19 and climate change. And originally it was just going to be climate change when we first started planning it, and the relationship between climate change and human health. And of course, COVID-19 appeared and became very central. And we had 800 people join a virtual session on exploring the intersections and also the common strategies and responses and types of work that we needed to be doing to respond to and address really complex dynamic issues like those. And we, of those 800 people, as we polled people using the same tool, Slido, what's most needed to respond to challenges like this, we really hadn't talked about systems or systems thinking or systemic approaches or anything. But by far the top most popular idea that came up in this group of 800 people from all over the world was a systemic approach. Systems leadership, an approach that really gets at the systemic nature of what's happening in these systems. And so people are recognizing everywhere a need for an approach that's really getting at not just root causes, because I'm not sure even what that means in the context of something like climate change or COVID-19, but really gets at the way our systems are systematically producing, in addition to some good outcomes, also systematically producing some poor outcomes, and particularly for people of color and for people who are economically marginalized, as well as for the environment that we exist in. So when we polled you all prior to the session, some of you, I think maybe 30 folks had contributed what stood out for you from Dana's work, and leverage points was a big one. I think there were even more people who mentioned that. And I didn't mention too, one of the other motivations for doing this session was we know so many people who have been influenced by Dana's work around systems thinking and leverage points and causal loop diagramming and all these things. And yet, as you dig into her work, you find there's so much in her work about being, about visioning, about working from intention, things that maybe we don't all see when we're plugged into thinking in systems and some of the more systems, the conventional kind of systems work that's out there. So part of what we're going to do here is to touch on some of those other aspects of Dana's work and bring them into focus more. Things like envisioning a sustainable world, which a couple of you mentioned, and the limits to growth. So this this cancer that of limitless growth in a finite system, and Dana's work around limits to growth and really pointing in the first real clear way that we were living in a finite system but growing exponentially in our consumption and production. So a quick look at today's flow. We've done welcome introduction, sharing some origin and context for this session. Now we're going to go into sharing those 5 insights that among the 3 of us we've pulled out. These we'll share some criteria. I think, Martha, we kind of set that aside, but maybe in the slide deck we can share why we chose these 5 insights. But one of them was we wanted them to reflect more of the whole person Dana really was, and the richness and breadth of her thinking and her way of being in the world. So for each insight, then we'll share an example in practice, and then also share some methods that you might use in your own work to leverage that insight. Then we'll go into some individual reflection, some whole group sharing, and really contribute on the richness and diversity of the group that's joined together here today. And we'll close at in about 64 minutes or so.
Great. So one place where we felt it would be important to start is a quote from Dana, starting from a voice of Dana. So a change in purpose changes system profoundly, even if every element and interconnection remains the same. So when we think of places also where to intervene in a system, of course, goals are high up in the list of influence. And to me, one thing that was very relevant in Dana's work is really that distinction between the stated goal and the actual goal, what the actual system delivers. You might say that a system is actually about, like a school is about education, right? Producing education in young people. There's a whole set of other things that are produced based on the premises of how that education is carried out. So essentially, this distinction is very key to me and in the work. And during the pandemic and more recently with other big social changes and reflection that we're living through, I've been wondering a lot about what would it look like to actually design a system so that it does deliver the stated goal. And to me, the pandemic was an example of how it feels to actually realign goals of multiple subsystems. In this case, initially, at least in the early phases of the pandemic, to achieve the goal of public safety. So maybe going away from the economic production, realigning everything, and we felt it in our lives, in our homes, in our children's daily schedules, in the hospital deliveries, and I mean, it really felt that, you know, we reorganized society around one particular goal. How that goal was achieved, or is that achieved, it's not a story. but the feeling of it, that absolutely overwhelming transformation. So the question for me was very clear, inspired by Dana. What would it look like to actually center something that really, really matters? And so I thought I would share a few questions that might inform the thinking around goals. So if you think of an intervention, something that you're working on, what are you designing for? What are you centering? And what are you working toward? What would our world look like if we really centered equity? It would feel something similar like reorganizing during the pandemic, but with a different purpose.
I just started laughing, Marta, because I literally just got off a session where we did this TRIZ or inversion thinking exercise, and we asked this network if our goal was to fail in our work, what kinds of things would we think and do? And they generated a whole bunch of really rich things that we should not think or do if we want to be successful. And the list looks so familiar. And so it was as if our goal in the way we were working before as a group was really to not progress, to essentially fail in the work. So at Co-Creative, we support a number of multi-stakeholder collaborations in different areas, including in agriculture. And with one of those networks, we were asking the question, what is the US agricultural system really designed to do? So not the espoused goal of the system, which was like to feed the world, but the actual goal that the system seemed to be designed for. And the group came to this conclusion that the goal of the US agricultural system or the food system is to produce more calories at lower cost. And not just that, systematically more calories at a systematically lower cost. And so that's also driving systematic increases in pesticide use, in synthetic inputs, and topsoil loss, and systematic declines in nutrient density, soil health, and downstream from that in human health. So it was very interesting to really look at that system and think, wow, that really is the goal in terms of the way that that system is actually operating. So instead, this group came up with, well, our goal is to regenerate those broken natural systems and to support their regeneration, to bring the earth back into balance to benefit our land, air, water, and all living creatures. And that goal evolved a bit over time, but Martha, you were talking about the feeling that's associated with the goal. And I have this experience when there's a point at which a group really deeply commits to a goal that's bigger than any one of us, it's a visceral experience. And that was for that group. There was a visceral experience of repugnance when we realized what the system was really built for. And then there was this visceral like pull forward in the work when we defined the real goal that we wanted to work toward. So I want to note, we're going to share a couple tools here. Some of you have seen we've activated a poll in Slido. So if you want to go to slido.com, you can use the event code Donella. There's a question there, what's coming up for you? So as we go through these insights and sharing some examples, please feel free to contribute there and also upvote as you see what others are contributing. So we'll share some this slide deck that's going to have links to some of these materials, but these are some of the methods that we use around naming and acting on the goals. Massed goals being meaningful, audacious, specific, and time-bound, and epic goals being these more poetic and spiritual kinds of statements of our goal in collaborations.
And the words from Donella. Start with the vision. Be open to any path by which the vision will be realized. Be patient. and persistent. Be true to the vision, and things will work out. So there is, maybe many of you know that Donella, so Dana, that's how she liked to be called, spent actually a great deal of intention in the activity of visioning. She would get furious if someone would try to squish or criticize a vision before it would actually emerge. And so she was very protective of visions, that potential that we all have in some forms. So a vision is an image of a desired future. There's beautiful examples of how Dana's visioning actually produced manifestations in the world, like a beautiful co-housing village that is half an hour away from where I live and I visit on a regular basis. So it's a vision, it's an image of a desired future. It's not so much what's feasible and possible, but it's about what is fully desirable by you. It's what you fully envision with no limitations, without really worrying about the plan, how you get to that vision. There's a difference, in fact, between vision and goal. A goal can be very specific and it can be connected to a plan, indeed. But a vision is actually something sensorial, visual, but also might engage other senses. And visions are emotional investments. This is something that Dana was very clear about. This gap between current reality and vision is something actually that we explore a lot at the Academy for Systems Change. And when we talk about system leadership, we also talk about that the pain and the intensity of holding the current state of things and yet continue to envision something better. So you can see here that one of the qualities that Dana really stresses is the ability to strengthen ourselves to endure the pain of the enormous gap between the world we know and the world we profoundly long for. I believe that it's only by admitting, permitting, and carrying that pain that we can gradually move our world away from its present suffering and unsustainability and toward our deepest values and dearest visions. So yeah, I tend to think these days in particular that hope is also an emotional investment. And so, yeah, just being aware that that pain is important to be shared and held and made visible is just the opposite of denial. Because there's not much purpose in actually talking about visions without experiencing visioning, I would like to guide us through a visioning process. And for that, I hope my surroundings don't become too noisy, but I would ask Melissa and Russ to let me know if they do. So I would like to invite us to engage with our minds and our bodies. And so I would like you to find a comfortable position if you're sitting or if you're standing. And before we go deeper into this practice that will take a few minutes, I would like to ask you to remember, maybe you mentioned the value that informs more consistently or consistently your life and work. So there is one value that you chose. I saw beautiful values that were in the word cloud. If you haven't contributed a value, just think of one value that normally or regularly informs your life and your work, something that you really care about. And we'll take a moment to pick one. It could be the same that you shared in the word cloud. So let's proceed then. You're welcome to turn off your video if you'd like to create a more intimate space for yourself. And let's start by rubbing the palms of our hands quickly, like creating a friction. A moment. And then placing one hand on your belly, just above the belly button. And take in a deep breath. And as you exhale, close your eyes. Notice for a moment the movement of your belly as your breathing goes back to normal. Your other hand can be gently in your lap. Notice the sounds around you. You're welcome to bring both hands on your lap or in the position that is most comfortable for you. Then I would like you to check in with your body. Notice how the body is feeling. Is there any tiredness, any excitement or pain, stillness? Whatever you may find. You could start from the top of your head, going down to the soles of your feet. And from the shoulders down to your fingertips. As you notice sensations in your body, there's nothing that you need to do. There's no need to understand why these sensations are there. Just give them permission to be. And now if you find a bit more spaciousness in your body and your mind, we're going to do something a bit different. Bring back to mind that value of yours that you might have shared, that value that informs your life and your work. And please bring to mind a time when you have experienced that value as deeply embodied. Maybe it was a situation, a conversation, a place. Maybe it was a community or a specific person who you think embodies deeply that value that you really care about. And it doesn't matter for the purposes here whether that person is living or not. What do you see? And who do you see? And if nothing comes to mind, that is okay too. Notice any feelings that might arise for you right now. If you are fully able to live and manifest that value that you recognized in that person or community or conversation, if you were to recognize that and fully able to live it in the most embodied way, how would you show up in relationship to yourself, to other people around you, for example, in your family or in your team or in your organization or community or in your state? You can also take it to the world if that's your choice. how would you show up in relationship? Try to be visual. Who is around you? Who's there? If others around you were embodying this quality, this value that you really deeply care about, what would that look like and feel like? So if it wasn't just you holding that value, but you were surrounded actually, what would it look like for you, for the people that you care about and you are committed to? Whether it's in your family, in your team, in your organization or community, or your region, your state, or the whole world. What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it feel like for nature to be part of that kinship? So as you try to be visual and sensorial, who is there? What might be the interactions like? What kind of practices, rituals? Look at yourself. What kind of work do you do in that context? What special role do you play? What is the pace of everyday life? What is the vibe? What is the relationship with nature? Who is making decisions? How are decisions made? Just take a moment to envision that particular world where you're not alone holding that value. And now that we have spent a bit of time in this practice, let's take a moment to thank the fruits of your visioning and invite them in this conversation. Let them be with us, make this experience more human for all of us. And gently come back to the sounds in the space that you're in. You're welcome to open your eyes back to this space. And thank you for adventuring with me in something that is very meaningful. I know for sure it is for Donella Meadows. Russ, you're welcome to take it from here.
Thank you, everyone. You may have seen we've activated a poll in Slido. In one word, how was that experience for you? So we have some folks starting to contribute, and I'll share the screen here. Someone said spine tingling. Martha, one of the things I appreciate you did there as part of the visioning is the sensory piece of what am I seeing, what am I feeling. Even I could get to what am I smelling. My word was beauty, and I was smelling some beautiful smells. But it struck me how when we're in these situations at times that can seem so unreal, how our vision can be so real, and it can be so concrete and tangible and present with us to help us through the uncertainty. So we just experienced there, I'll go back to this slide here. A visioning exercise, and we'll have a link, maybe not exactly the way Martha did it, but there's a link in the slide deck for that exercise. I'll share a quick example of a letter from the future. Dana has a beautiful letter from the future in Global Citizen. Some of you have probably read Senior Citizens of 2089. And we did a few weeks ago with a collaboration in Hawaii called Nakama Haloa, which is the children of Haloa, a letter from the future exercise. And this is a collaboration that's focused on supporting Native Hawaiian youth who are in the foster system or affected by the foster care system and the child protection system in Hawaii to develop lasting networks of support. And there's a lot of great activity, a lot of great work being advanced. But we were at the point where we really needed a clear vision of where all this was going. And so we asked people, we had two sessions. On the first day, we asked everyone to contribute one part of what things will look like in the year 2030 when we've succeeded in our work together. And right after that session, a group came together and they wrote a letter from the future from a young woman who had been through the child welfare system in Hawaii, who had been through the foster system. And now she was working in child welfare and she was helping other families. And she was describing to this group what they had done and how the work had changed their life, changed her life. And not in general ways, but in very specific ways. And so we had we had the help we needed to navigate for me and my family, the system of services and supports that were available that at times could be so overwhelming to my family in addition to trying to earn a living and keep their family together. So it's a really beautiful way to make all of what we're doing now concrete and a message back to us from the kind of future that we want to move toward. Then you'll also see here a connection to guided journaling, another exercise from, I think, Presencing Institute. Marta.
Yes, thank you, Russ. For those who stake their identity on the role of the omniscient conqueror, the uncertainty exposed by systems thinking is hard to take. If you can't understand, predict, and control, what is there to do? So I'm sure many of you are familiar with these words, but this is one of the tenets of systems thinking, and in particular, Dana's contribution to systems thinking, which was initially informed by her own understanding that with enough data, with enough modeling tools, enough understanding, diagnostic understanding, you could actually inform the trajectory of systems. And it was the realization of a lifetime that actually there's a ton of humility in recognizing how systems work. And so essentially this idea of unpredictability and therefore the need to dance with systems. And if you think of current policies or politics, how attuned are they with the notion of dancing? I'm a dancer, I dance and teach tango, and there's something so unpredictable and creative in that process. And so this idea of, even now, if you think about with the pandemic, there's been a rigidity of a type of all or nothing in linear thinking that is sometimes really, I don't know, depressing. And so I'm very intrigued by this idea of the dance. And there's, of course, the beautiful write-up essay that Dana wrote, Dancing with Systems, that is linked here. So I'm just curious, what comes up for you, Russ, when you think about the unmanageability, so to speak, or this idea of control, letting go of control?
Yeah, when we work with groups, there is a real desire for control.
I know.
And the illusion that somehow we're just going to do this, that, and one more thing, and then everything's going to be fixed. Not only will it be fixed, but it'll be fixed for a long time. That somehow we're going to, as we've said early in Kurt Lewin's work, we're going to unfreeze the situation, shift things, and then freeze them again, and they're going to stay that way. Mm-hmm. The other thing that stands out to me, Marta, about what you shared is how we can create experiences that help us become really present to the complexity of the system. And we actually support groups in becoming overwhelmed. Not overwhelmed as in we're going to give up, because we've embraced that vision and we're being pulled forward by that vision and by our powerful, compelling goal. But there's a point of letting go when we've really unpacked just how huge and complex and multifaceted a system is. And this can happen in a landscape map of a system, but it also happened one time with a leader we were working with in a particular community who basically said, I've got the answer. The donor just needs to give me the money and I'll get it done because I know what's needed. How many times have you heard that? I know what's needed here. I'll get it done. And he had a particular solution to poverty and education and all the aspects of the work. And he went out on what we call an empathy interview, where he joined us. He joined another interviewer from one of the team. They went to do an empathy interview with this young single mother who had a newborn. She was working 3 jobs. She had no transportation, so every time she needed to get to one of those jobs, she needed to not just find transportation, she also needed to find childcare. And so he walked into this interview thinking, well, what's needed is more books, and we need better teachers, we need more accountability in the schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as soon as he walked into this room, the first thing he noticed was this woman's house. The first thing he noticed was there were books everywhere. The second thing he noticed was, oh, she is the opposite of lazy. I thought that people just needed to be motivated. This woman is working harder than I am to take care of her child. And as he listened to her challenges and her life experiences, for the first time, he really became present to the complexity of the challenges that people in his community were facing. And this is the guy who had clearly the most power. He had the most money. He had the most influence in the community. And so that moment of becoming truly present to the complexity was overwhelming. A few months later, actually, I think it was 2 or 3 months later, there's a meeting in the community, and there are a couple hundred folks from around the community, and they're all going to come together to talk about this work and how they're going to take it forward. And he stands up in front of the group and he said, folks, I thought I had the answer. Many of you heard me say that I thought I knew the way to do this. But when I interviewed this mother and discovered just how wrong I was about the complexity and the challenge and the experiences of people being impacted by the way our system is working, I realized I don't know anything. And I realized there's no way any one of us can do this ourselves. So just a beautiful moment of letting go when I'm faced with the complexity, not letting go of the vision. He was adamant about the vision, not letting go of the goals. He was adamant about the goals, but he let go of the means and he let go of control. So a few methods there. We'll share those in the deck. Marta.
Yeah, another pretty extraordinary piece from leverage points. So there is yet one leverage point that is even higher than changing a paradigm. That is to keep oneself unattached in the arena of paradigms, to stay flexible, to realize that no paradigm is true, that everyone, including the one that sweetly shapes your own worldview, is a tremendously limited understanding of an immense and amazing universe that is far beyond human comprehension. And this is a very interesting one. Of course, paradigms are the mindsets and belief systems from where a whole cascade of manifestations arise in systems. So that's the root, if you will, of the system workings and the system structures. And what I think is brilliant about Lena's understanding of reflections on is that there are emotional, I don't know what that is, but can you still hear me? Okay. So there is an emotional investment in a paradigm because it has to do with one's own identity oftentimes. And so those are very tricky, interesting leverage points to explore. And also this idea of becoming aware of our own mindsets and beliefs can bring deep, radical empowerment in that you become unattached. And at the time of deep social reflection and awareness, this is a reminder of what does it look like to really become vulnerable enough and unattached enough that one can notice and take a distance from the beliefs in ways that decouple the beliefs from the identity, which is something that is very, very hard to do. And oftentimes that's where the so-called work to become really aware agents in the systems that we work. That's where the deep, investment, the deep inquiry lies. There's much more to say, and that's why just pausing here. But maybe let's start from here. I should say maybe one last thing, that, there is a temptation to just go and attack, so to speak, from a solutioning point of view, go for the highest leverage point, and the highest of all is this awareness, of course. That doesn't mean that the other intervention points are less valuable. And there's a whole reflection that Dana actually produced after publishing this work on leverage points that really recontextualizes and clarifies how she uses this series of this list of leverage points. Maybe that's something we can share.
Yeah, that sounds great, Marta.
Yes.
It reminds me of David Foster Wallace, the author. He was giving a commencement speech at a college here in the US, and he shares this story. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way. The older fish, as he passes them, nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit. And eventually one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" I think the paradigms that most define us are the ones we can see the least, that we're most blind to, right? And particularly in systems change work, we're seeing this show up around very kind of a paradigm or a set of paradigms that are very Western and very dominant in the way work is done, in what gets looked at, what doesn't, what values are brought to the table, what values are not. How do we make meaning of situations? Do we work from the neck up, or do we work with spirit, heart, mind, body, etc.? And so there's a lot of work going on in the area of systems change around really recognizing, pointing out, acknowledging, and decentering particularly Western dominant values in the way the work is being done. So a couple of methods, one that we use a lot, and we're sharing a course, a manual for a course that we have on polarity thinking. Inversion thinking is also a way to kind of recognize some of our beliefs in use. We can do a variation on this where we just say, if our primary goal was to fail in our work together, what beliefs or preferences would we hold most deeply? And so it's a bit different than the typical TRIZ or inversion thinking process. So insight, whichever insight this is it 5?
I think it's our last insight to share here. So there is no single legitimate boundary to draw around the system. We have to invent boundaries for clarity and sanity. And boundaries can produce problems when we forget that we have artificially created them. So yes, this is a beautiful reminder. One thing that Dana would also say, lines are in the mind, or boundaries are of our own making. And so this idea that each problem really needs redrawing the boundaries. And when we mean, what we mean by boundaries, it's not necessarily spatial boundaries, but oftentimes it has to do with who is at the table. And so this question, who needs to be at the table, in fact. And in one particular case of that is the question of, do we have actually the voices of the most affected at the table? And Dana would talk about policies that are building accountability in a system because they have those voices of the most impacted as part of the design of a given policy. And this important question of who are we accountable to? It's sometimes, the farther away you are from the people who are most impacted by policies, by decisions, the more disconnected, more that is lost. And so just a reminder of like where you draw intentionally, and then the ability of letting go of that initial boundaries. Like, okay, well, actually, our framing of the problem or the issue is changing, so we actually need our voices, to expand these boundaries. And one typical question connected to this insight is that I get a lot is, so where do I start? Where do I intervene? And so that's another conversation, of course. If we could have a webinar on that. But one typical answer that I give to that question is, well, what do you center? What do you want to center? And then in whatever you do, in whatever form you are connected to other human beings, you center that particular thing. And we all live in somewhat networked ways. And so that's another way to kind of live across boundaries, so to speak. Russ, what do you think?
A beautiful paradox again, Martha, the paradox of I can be fully intentional and I can be fully open at the same time. I think a few people have mentioned paradoxes in some of what's coming up that's being shared in Slido. One way I think of systems work is so much of it comes down to shifting boundaries and changing signals. And this is where we bridge from systems thinking into complexity. But I think the two are just kissing cousins anyway. There's a story from one of the collaborations we support, Clean Electronics. The goal of Clean Electronics is to eventually eliminate worker exposures to hazardous chemicals. So toxins, carcinogens, things that cause sterility, et cetera. They're really nasty chemicals being used, and sometimes without the proper PPE and procedures in place. And this is a multi-stakeholder collaboration. And one of the challenges that the group was facing was that, sorry, I'm gonna mute someone here. If you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself, that would be helpful. So one of the things that started to emerge in the group was you had the worker advocates and the campaign organizations, and then you had the electronics brands and the manufacturers. And there was that difference was always in the room, and it was in the room by design. Part of that question that Martha asked, who needs to be at the table, and really maximizing diversity. But we started to get to a point where this polarity started to show up of the companies were really pushing for quick wins. Like, what can we do really quickly, just to show progress and to get moving on this work? And the NGOs were really pushing for transformational systemic work that was really gonna profoundly shift the whole system. And people were starting to get polarized over this. And so one of the things we did was we mapped that polarity, which you can find how to do in one of the resources we're sharing. But there was also these things play out at many levels of the system. So that tension isn't just a tension in the group, it's a tension in the broader industry, and it's a tension between individuals and even within individuals. And so there were these two people who had been kind of not really arguing, but you could tell there was some tension between them. And one of them worked for a big electronics company. The other one worked for a worker advocacy organization. And as we dug into this tension and started to really become present to our shared greater purpose, the richness in leveraging these paradoxes and tensions that were showing up in the group, there was a moment I remember distinctly where the woman from the electronics company turned to the woman who was at her table after she had made a statement. The worker advocacy person had made a statement into the room, and the person from the electronics company turned to her and said, "I just realized we're the same person." So they were working in different parts of the system. They had different drivers and priorities. But when it came to values, when it came to purpose, when it came to intent, when it came to vision, they were really in so many ways the same person showing up in different places in the system to advance a vision together. So some tools there, we'll share those. So we'd like to pause here, and we've just covered a lot of territory, and that was only 5 insights out of how many insights in Dana's work. But at least for what's come up so far, let's just take a moment of reflection. And if you'd like to go into Slido at any point, you can see what's coming up there, contribute what's coming up for you, and also upvote other things that are resonating for you and what folks are sharing. So I'm going to switch to that the view here. All right. Dan, you put the word connection here and it seemed to resonate with folks. I'm wondering, would you be willing to unmute yourself and share a bit more about what that means for you?
Hey, Russ.
Hey, Dan.
Thanks for asking. I think wherever you're at, and again, this is like an awesome experience, particularly just connecting around the world with folks. I see connection as really a core value, core need for everyone. And I think as we think about our values, our purpose, our kind of where we fit in this world, connecting with others is so very, very important. And I think about it in reflecting about my work in helping students, helping faculty, helping administrators, helping healthcare workers, do their tough work, but at the same time maintain a high level of connection with each other. So that's kind of what I'm focused on.
Thank you. Yeah, there are different variations on that saying, collaboration moves at the speed of trust, or work moves at the speed of trust. Which gets us to trust that together we can build a path forward through the uncertainty of the complexity. Chris, I don't know if you'd like to share more about that. We also have Anonymous, who submitted the word paradox and got a lot of votes for that. So if anyone would like to comment on paradox.
That's one of the paradoxes, right, Ross? we do not know the path forward, right? The beautiful story you shared of the leader who acknowledged what someone once said are the three most important words at a civic table: I don't know. We are told as leaders that we're supposed to have the answers. To acknowledge leadership in when driving system change and working in complex systems, I think is more about our ability to practice inquiry than it is to advocate for an answer. So saying, I don't know, and then, what I've added to that statement is that to have enough confidence and enough trust with the others that you work with, that you can find a path forward without a preordained answer. I think that's what thinking in systems is all about, is having confidence that together we can reframe these systems, reshape these systems, help them to regenerate in ways that get the outcomes that our hearts desire.
Thank you, Chris. It reminds me of in the clean electronics collaboration that I just mentioned, there was a point where the core organizing group called the design team was meeting after a convening of this network, and they were debriefing. And one of the leaders among the NGO community was, the worker community was a guy who had worked on worker safety and protection and empowerment pretty much his entire adult career, so at least 35 years. And he said to this diverse group of people from companies that he had campaigned against, he had attacked, he had criticized, he said, one thing I love about this group is we avoid roadblocks by continually committing to each other and our work together. So it was really that trust that they could move forward together, which had been borne out in action, right? Because it can't just be words saying, yeah, we want to work with you, but it was borne out in action. Others, I'll just scroll through here, and if anyone would like to unmute as you see something you contributed and maybe add more to it.
I was intrigued by the question of essentially what David Stroh mentions here, like what you are willing to let go of in order to recommit to the new goal of a system. That's the question that I read in his comment, for example. That's it.
And we definitely have to put David's book in the resources.
Yes.
In addition to thinking in systems, if you're doing social change work, David's book is probably considered required reading at this point.
Systems thinking for social change.
Yeah. Kieran, you mentioned here interacting beyond systems on a human level. Is there more you'd like to share about that?
Hello.
Hi.
You know, I think it boils down to we all want things to be more efficient, more smooth, more interactive. And these systems do help us achieve those end goals and get those relationships going better. But I think it's also about valuing those human relationships and human interactions and not losing sight of the people that are involved in those systems. No, let's not forget how human we are, and let's not forget how we interact with each other.
Yeah. And that kind of relates to a trend we're seeing in this work of really connecting systems thinking approaches with design, human-centered design approaches too.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Akash, I'm intrigued. You just wrote hope and despair, and it clearly resonated with a couple other people. What was coming up for you there?
For me, I think it's just, I think it's like let's say for example, in India, like I think with the pandemic, there is just it's just exposed a lot of our broken systems, right? And exposed what's not working. And, it's like horrifying at some levels as to like the different gaps that have been highlighted and how people have suffered over the last few months. But it's also extremely comforting and calming to see the amount of people in the local communities that have stepped up to support their communities, and people working on different issues. And I think that's been present with me with respect to climate change, but also with respect to the corona crisis at the moment.
Thank you.
Russ, if you're inviting contributions, can I say
That's
something?
Richard. Hello.
Hi, thank you. I'm the one who commented on the universal Darwinism. I'm so excited to connect with this community. I haven't connected with you before. To have people talking about the science of complex systems and also doing a closed eye process to connect with our hearts and visualize our vision. That's just wonderful. What a wonderful coming together of the humanity of things and the science of things. It's really exciting for me. That individualism of the Darwinian model of how biology works, I think influences a lot of people's thinking about, this is the unit survives, the unit dies, survival of the fittest, selfishness, competition. And my understanding of the evolutionary biology is that it's not how it works in the biology. And we know that that's not how it works in human systems too. And the work that I do is trying to connect what we now understand about how the biology works, which go beyond Darwin, to connect that with what we know in our hearts is how we want to be. Right? We don't want to be individuals. We want to be part of something larger. How can we understand how the system becomes more than the sum of the parts by the relationships that we build with one another? And how we can build bridges between the scientific understanding of the biology and our natural knowing about the human systems and the relationships we want to build. Just so excited to be connected with this community and just wanted to speak up for you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Richard. So before we close this, reflections on what's coming up for folks, was there anyone else who submitted something and you just wanted to maybe enrich what you shared with the group? If so, you might unmute yourself.
Hi, Russ. I didn't get to put mine down, but I think the thing that really stayed with me was around the dancing with systems, and that sense that we can't control or figure systems out, but we can dance with them. Because I think some of the issues, some of the social issues that I'm working on, actually, that's on one hand very scary, on the other hand very empowering. And I think, why am I able to work on those issues now when I couldn't work on them 5 years ago? Because 5 years ago, actually, they felt like systems that we couldn't even engage in. So now, just the thought of starting to think, well, actually, we're not necessarily starting with the outcome, but we're saying, actually, let's tango with it. Let's see where it goes. A real kind of coming to it with a real openness. Really empowering, but really scary. So thank you for sharing that.
You pronounce your name Christian?
Marcia, that's my husband's name.
Oh,
I'm
Marcia.
Marcia.
Okay. Marcia, we've noticed that in the recent, just even in the past month or two, partly as a result of the pandemic, partly as a result of the race, the demonstrations and increased consciousness and awareness around race and anti-Blackness and things like that. Things that weren't discussable before are so much more discussable. Even things that weren't possible before are so much more possible. Like in food systems, people are saying things are happening now in food systems that didn't seem possible 6 months ago, but now they get done in a week. So yeah, that disruption is certainly opens opportunities. In addition to the fear and uncertainty, it opens doorways. Beautiful.
Yeah, there's this humanist dimension that Donella Meadows brings to the work that really resonates at this time when we need to be creative and engage as full human beings. So yeah, I love that comment, Marcia. Thank you.
I wonder if we might do one more poll real quick. Martha, you think we can do that? And then we'll share a couple resources and close.
Sure. Yeah, let's have that maybe in the background. So I mean,
Yeah.
inviting in and then have it in the background. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So in Slido, I've activated a poll. And again, you can contribute and you can see what other people have done and upvote. The question is, if enough people understood and embodied these insights, how might our world look different? And we'll share this out. We'll kind of keep it as a surprise. So we're not going to show you. We're going to share it out afterward in the materials when we send a follow-up right after the session. All right. So we want to share just some resources that are available to you in addition to the tools that we shared in each section. Marta, is there anything you want to highlight here from the Academy?
Yes, well, certainly, I would love any of you to sign up for our newsletter at the Academy, so that way you know what's coming up from our end in terms of opportunities to engage. And of course, there's so much that we have to share from Donella Meadows. We have more than 1,000 plus write-ups and essays. So that's at the donellameadows.org. And also Facebook, we regularly post her work. And we have videos of Dana speaking. So we have read from her work, but you can actually hear her in action and see her in action with a collection of videos that we have. And if you're curious about more tools for systems change and systems awareness, I would suggest what we call the Systems Leader Fieldbook. So at systemsfieldbook.org. Yeah, that's a pluralistic approach to curating tools of many different organizations. So.
So these are some resources from Co-Creative. We put a lot of things on the tools page on our website, but that's probably 15 to 20% of what we have available. So all the training courses you see here, we give away all of our materials. So if you said, hey, I'd really like the training manual for facilitating collaborative innovation, which is our approach to systemic change work, we're happy to share those. We might even invite you to the secret page where it just links to everything. And we have a webinar coming up in July with Auntie Puanani Burgess, where Auntie Pua will talk about a call from her ancestors at this time of uncertainty and crisis. So again, we'll follow up with you. We'll share this entire slide deck with all the tools and resources there. You're welcome to subscribe to the Academy's newsletter. We'll put a link to that and to Co-Creative's newsletter. And if you have questions, feel free to connect. And maybe what we'll do is a quick offer to, if folks want to connect to a larger community working on systems change, Marta, maybe we can find a way to do that too with the work of Illuminate.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there's more brewing, more co-creation happening here with Russ. So,
all right. All right, that concludes our session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much,
everybody.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there.
Thank you very much.
Very
inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.